World This Week, 7 days, 4 Paris-based correspondents, 1 hour. The World This Week in partnership with the Daily Beast. We say hello to foreign editor Christopher Dickey. How are you?
Good, and always happy to be here.
Happy to have you. Happy to have as well Mark Dean, reporter for the Bloomberg News Agency.
Hello, François.
And also as well, she cracks the whip on the second floor here in the building. France24.com senior editor Lila Jacinto. And Paul Moreira, whose latest documentary aired on French television station Canal+ this week, The Fabrication of a Monster. Perhaps we'll talk a little bit more about that later. How are you?
Pleasure. Hello.
The World This Week on Facebook and Twitter, the hashtag World This Week. French elections, well, they're a marathon that end with a sprint after last Sunday's first round of voting, a 2-week runoff campaign between two radically different candidates. Plenty of high drama in centrist Emmanuel Macron's hometown of Amiens on Wednesday. But look who shows up while he's inside speaking to union reps at a Whirlpool factory that's due to move to Poland. Yes, his far-right rival Marine Le Pen. She poses with striking workers in the parking lot, promises to save the factory, and that forced Macron's hand. Prime Minister, in turn, going to the picket line where he braved the boos and whistles and argued the point for more than 3/4 of an hour, even though he bluntly told the workers that he couldn't save their jobs. The confrontation did end in handshakes. Mark Dean, you were covering that story.
We had the feeling that we were seeing a piece of history. I mean, it was really impressive. You know, I followed Emmanuel Macron since 2012, and I know he's up to this stuff, but you have to understand, we got to the factory, there were burning tires, a sort of a mob atmosphere, a few people chanting Marine Président, and you know, I was genuinely nervous. Macron, he waded into the crowd, and I think what's really important is that he understood partly that he had to do this, but partly what was required, and he needed to listen to them and spend some time with them and not give up his ideas. He actually really defended his ideas on the European Union and globalization, but also just understood that he had to absorb a bit of the anger and let them vent, and then continue on the conversation. And in our reporting, you know, we talked to some people around, and a number of people, factory workers, who told us, look, we didn't want to see him. We didn't want to see this guy come and tell us his free trading views, but you know, at least he listened to us, and a couple of them said, well, you know, I think I'll vote for him now. So
that's interesting, because for people who weren't in Amiens, there's the sense that the big story was Marine Le Pen upstaging him by that surprise show in the parking lot.
It made it a massive story. You know, we were with Macron in the Chambre de Commerce in the center of Amiens when the news broke that Le Pen was showing up, and it felt like, oh, you know, here's a day gone for Macron. Here it's wasted. Marine's, you know, killed his chances. I think in the end he comes out of it even, probably. I mean, who knows how to judge these things? He doesn't necessarily come out of it ahead. But it could have been a terrible day for him, and it just came out neutral.
Lila, was that your feeling?
That was. I mean, as you said, this was a classic story of you know, a multimedia story, because his conversation was on Facebook Live, and you know, I tuned in at that stage, and I agree. He absolutely, you know, he held his ground. It was not an easy message, and one thing that he said that was particularly strong, which was like, I'm not going to ride on a truck and tell you that I'm going to solve this. And it seems like, you know, the local papers the next day also gave him the round by saying that he had a 45-minute conversation, a debate, not a 10-minute selfie shtick.
Is that how it's being perceived, though, by ordinary voters, Paul?
I think everybody's talking about the physical courage of Macron, and it's obvious he went there and he faced what he had to face. But for me, the real news is to see blue-collar people chanting for Marine Le Pen, chanting for the National Front. This is quite new in France. We know there has been a working class vote for the National Front for quite a number of years now, but they have always been somehow, you know, very low key. You wouldn't have any public expression of support to the National Front. And it's probably one of the first times that you see working class people who have always been associated with the left, displaying heavy support.
Across the channel, we've seen blue-collar labor supporters desert that party for UKIP. Are you surprised about what you're describing?
I'm not surprised to know that they vote for the National Front, but I've done a story like a year and a half ago among the steel workers of Hayange, Florange, the ArcelorMittal people of the east of France. There are like 50% of them who vote for National Front, but they're ashamed of it because it's like a nihilistic vote. They vote for it, but they don't really believe in it. They're totally desperate. And for the first time in the faces of these people, I saw that they believed in Marine Le Pen, which is quite frightening because you know that she's going nowhere.
Christopher Dickey?
I give this round to Marine Le Pen. I think it was a great coup to go there when she did. I think she moved very quickly, understanding what the situation was. She goes after Macron in his hometown. He's talking in the Chamber of Commerce. He may be talking to union reps, but he seems remote from the situation. He does go out afterwards, but with this kind of thing, it's theater. It's who gets there first. And she was the one who made the headlines. That would barely have been covered if she had not, in fact, gone and taken the selfies and done what she did. And I think that Paul is exactly right. I think people are not apologetic about voting for the Front National now. I think that her supporters have come out, I won't say come out of the closet, but they've come out of the woodwork, and they are, they are a very strong base of support, very much like Trump's base of support in the United States. And that's something we really haven't seen in France for a very long time, and certainly not associated with a radical party like Marine Le Pen.
I think it's important to note, if you look at the first round of the presidential election, the polls were bang on with Le Pen's support.
Which is a huge surprise.
Well, which is to say, historically, we'd expect the actual vote to be much higher than the polls because people wouldn't admit it to pollsters, and that's over now.
That's over for now. Now, the latest survey gives Macron an edge of 20 points. The one survey in particular I'm referring to actually boosts his rating over yesterday's poll. They're doing a daily poll.
I mean, look, whoever you talk to about this, who digs into the poll, says there's no way he cannot win. But of course, I think we've become all very uncomfortable with that sort of message. I mean, 20 points is a big margin, and I think we're going to talk about this too. The abstention in the Fillon camp, in the Mélenchon camp, it raises a lot of questions. And
well, and one of the polls showed that 41% of the people who voted for Macron voted for him by default, because they just didn't like any of the other candidates. And he's relying on that to become president, but that doesn't give you a very solid base.
Doesn't give you a very solid base. Paul Moreira, a win by Macron with 51%, or a win by Macron with 60%. Does it make a big difference in the end when once everything's happened?
Yes, huge. Already the fact that Marine Le Pen, the National Front, may get up to 40% of the voters is already we've been accustomed to that because it has been growing steadily. But I'm not that old, and I still remember the National Front being at not even 1% of the voters. So it's in a lifetime to see a party that was created by some of the founders of the National Party. The National Front. We have to remind that they are members of the SS Corps, like Mr. Gauthier, who is now deceased. But they really belong to this filiation of French history. They had to get rid of Mr. Jalc because himself, he doubted the existence.
This is the interim leader who was put in there.
Exactly. Well, if you just dig a little bit, and very, very fast, you will find the traces of the 1930s in this party.
Marc Dean was talking about abstention, and this has been the topic of conversation in cafes, around water coolers. Will those who voted, the 55% who voted for other candidates, who will they vote for, or will they stay home? All eyes have been, since Sunday night, on the far-left candidate, Jean-Luc Mélenchon. Sunday night, he nearly finished third. He refused at the time to endorse Macron until he polled his own supporters online. The results of that survey come out next Wednesday.
médiacrates et oligarques jubilent.
The media moguls and the oligarchs are jubilant. For them, there is nothing more beautiful than a final round between two candidates who both support the status quo and who have no concern for the environment or for the perils facing human civilization.
Qui pèsent sur la civilisation humaine.
Lila Jacinto, your reaction to that message that he's putting out?
You know, I have to say this Mélenchon phenomenon, I was out of France and I came back and my colleagues and people I thought should know better had turned into Mélenchonists. You know, for me, it's obvious, you know, the extreme left meets with the extreme right on the night of the first round of the elections. He showed his true colors, which is just demagoguery. You know, his platform is himself. You know, and it's perfectly comprehensible now why people, you know, in factories in the Rust Belt of France who were extreme left would go for Marine Le Pen. You know, their platforms are pretty similar. And what is also alarming is this movement, the Insoumis, which, you know, we can debate how we translate it, but you know, several of the young people.
Hang on, I've heard people who were longtime Socialist Party supporters who said, "Look, we're sick of the Socialist Party. We're branded as left wing. We're sick of it not being left wing. Here's a guy who comes along and is left wing, and we like that."
I mean, personally, I'm sick of people who are sick of the system. You know, these are. I mean, I come back from reporting. I see, you know, an extremely privileged generation. Okay, they are not doing as well as their fathers and their grandfathers. You know, we have refugees pouring into this country, and they're simply sick of the system. But they don't really have an option of, you know, what is the change in the system. So of course, the left vote is being dissipated, and it's being taken on by extreme demagogues, and I'm surprised that these people get wooed to his message.
Really, I think what people need to understand is we have two Donald Trumps on the political scene here. One is Marine Le Pen, but the other one is Jean-Luc Mélenchon.
Mélenchon styles himself as a Bernie Sanders fighting.
No, he is vain. He is vindictive. He's a showman, and he's playing on the ignorance of people. That's exactly what Trump does.
It's difficult to like Mélenchon. He's very hostile to the rest of the world.
It's easy to like him if you're brainless.
To the press. but I must say that it's also a symptom of the fact that lately the French people, the public has felt like voting for left or voting for right has had no impact whatsoever on their daily lives, and that politics don't mean anything now. So there's this urge to invest votes and maybe hopes in people who display some kind of will to dramatically change things. So it says that also.
Yeah, I just have a problem with what you're saying in that we have numerous times on this show talked about the imbalances of the global economy, how capitalism right now is,
but these guys are
more
not
and more
offering
ruthless. And here's a guy.
But these guys are not offering any solutions to that. It's like, I mean, anybody who's covered any of these things, you look at this and you say, okay, what are Mélenchon's solutions to any of these questions? We're going to renegotiate the EU treaties, but really we want to get out of EU. We want to, we're going to get out of NATO. We're going to do all this. By the way, let's renegotiate the borders of Europe because they weren't right after World War II. Let's throw everything up in the air. Look, maybe it's just because I'm an old guy, but I've seen a lot of politicians and a lot of people say that they want to throw everything up in the air. And when everything comes down, it doesn't look better than it did before. So I just have no patience with it. Leila and I, this is the impatient side.
Okay. Thursday, there were high school students who staged anti-Le Pen marches. They were left-wing students, some who will be voting Emmanuel Macron, and some far-left teens who were calling to vote, I'll say it in French, ni patron, ni patrie, ni patron, neither for the nationalists, neither for the CEO, I guess is how you translate it, Mark Dean. What are your thoughts about, there wasn't huge crowds, but what are your thoughts about the youth vote and about the Mélenchon phenomenon?
Well, I think what's difficult to convey to people outside France is that, you know, when you talk about conversations happening in the bar and around the water cooler, you know, these are really tough conversations that are happening in France. This election is not over, and the demos, even if they're small, show that. And I think there is a generational thing. You know, it was said over here that young people do not take the policy side of politics as seriously as people did 20, 30 years ago. And I think that's a problem. That's partly why in every situation, whether we're talking about Marine Le Pen, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, or Donald Trump, you're getting a certain amount of voters just saying, look, I just want to send a message, you know, and stop with your political correctness. But hang on,
are we being patronizing when we're telling, oh, young people, they don't remember, well, the World War II, and they don't remember 2002? It's
a fair point, but, you know, we've also got to call it as we see it. You know, I'm 45 years old, and
but I don't think that's why they're voting for them. I think they're voting for them because both Le Pen and Mélenchon are guaranteeing them a standard of living and an idea of state support that basically is what their parents had or thought they had, and they like that. But nobody can afford that anymore.
I think they're different groups of voters. I mean, certainly the factory workers voting for Le Pen, that's it, because, you know, they want their job saved, and that's perfectly understandable. For young Parisians,
but young Parisians didn't vote. Nobody in Paris voted for Marine Le Pen. I mean, less than 5%. So it's not young Parisians. But you've been out and you've covered the demonstrations. Every time there's an effort to reform the labor law in this country, thousands and thousands of students go out in the street. Now, even if the law is about trying to reform the labor market so they can get jobs more easily, what is it that they say? No, we want guaranteed jobs for life. That's what they say.
See, for example, I've spent like 1 year investigating why blue collars now vote for National Front, and I went to the steel workers of Eastern France, and I discovered a reality I was not aware of, is that the travailleurs détachés, or detached workers. I discovered that guys were coming from Romania or from Bulgaria and staying for 3 months to do like subcontractor jobs, taking the jobs of French workers, you know, staying 3 months and then going back to their countries, working for 30% or 40% less than the contract is worth in France. And this is obviously breeding xenophobia, because when you have no jobs, and in certain areas of France, you have no jobs now for 2 generations, and something like that pops up, you think, well, Europe puts me in dire straits, and I have to get out of it. I'm not saying I agree with the fact that they vote for the National Front. I just tried to understand why they did it, and I understand it.
All right, we're gonna have to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Stay with us. You're watching The World This Week.